exciting and provocative summit sessions, Making AI Work at Work. These rebroadcast sessions are an opportunity for you to view some of the content that we shared at the Neuroleadership Summit this year in October, as well as to have a community discussion about some of the issues taking place therein. I'm Evan McFalls. I will be your host in the background, and I'll also be available to you to answer any questions that you have along the way. Please stick around for the recording. Please share it with your colleagues and share your thoughts. Share your thoughts in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us in from, and please enjoy the show. Stick around toward the end. We have some special announcements to share with you as well. Again, I thank you for joining us this week on Your Brain at Work Live, and I'm excited to get this show on the road with Making AI Work at Work.
Our first panelist has completed a surgical training at the University of Copenhagen and a doctoral degree in medical sciences at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Theodor Grantcharov. Our next panelist is a cognitive scientist and founder of the Center of Human Potential. He is formerly the scientific director at the Imagination Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. My friends, please help me to welcome to the stage Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. Next up, he's a venture builder and strategist with deep expertise in artificial intelligence. He serves as a research affiliate at the Institute for the Future. Please join me in welcoming to the platform Jeremy Kirschbaum. And joining us virtually is a distinguished fellow and futurist with the Institute for the Future. He is the author or co-author of 12 books and has helped organizations around the world prepare for and shape the future. Please welcome Bob Johansen. Also joining us virtually, she has over 20 years in product leadership. She has held several leadership roles at Workday and became the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Workday Ventures in 2021. Joining us virtually, Barbie McGann. And now he is the co-founder and CEO of the Neuroleadership Institute. You know him, you love him. Welcome to the platform, our host for our opening session today, Dr. David Rock.
Great job. Wow. Really excited for this session. We've been thinking about this for like a year, and somehow we managed to create the most complexity of any session in the history of sessions we've ever done, with 4 on stage, 2 on screens, and we've integrated AI in some crazy ways, so you'll see. We've got an incredible panel. I wanted to think really big about AI, so we've got someone on the brain. Scott's going to kick us off. We've got someone on the technology and the real thinking about this in tech today with Barbary from Workday. We've got Theodor, who's going to blow your mind with a provocation of what's possible and what we need to think about differently to really integrate AI. And then we have Bob Johansen and Jeremy, who are going to, I'll just let them surprise you, but they're going to do some incredible things with AI and show you kind of what's possible with the future of all of this. So an amazing panel, and I'm going to just help move the conversation along a little bit. So a couple of data points. Firstly, you've probably seen this, but I just think this is a good place to start. The data on this should be coming up right now, but it is not. If you can go to the data, 56% of people are now using AI today. 56%. What was that percentage like 2 years ago? Like a few percent, like nothing. So it's incredible acceleration of this, And many of you, either yourselves or know people that are using it every single day. And pretty much all of us will be using AI probably seamlessly every single day, many, many times a day. It's going to be part of our world like the internet is in a matter of months. 71% say it's reshaped roles and skills. 3/4 of HR leaders fear without AI, they risk being outpaced. Interesting. But I want to lift up a little bit and think about this, and it reminds me a little bit of a story when I first went to Shanghai in China, maybe some of you have been there, I got off the plane from a long flight, and I got on this, everyone said, oh, you got to take this fast train, it's the most incredible train. And I got on this train, it was faster than any train I've ever seen. And they had this big sign up, like this big, with the speed you were going, and I watched it go from like 50 kilometers, some of you know what I'm talking about, kilometers, right? 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, 150, 200, 250, 300. I'm like, what? We're going 350 kilometers an hour. This is incredible. And just faster than I've ever been in a train, and it was so fascinating. And then 10 minutes later, it was like, here, we've traveled some ridiculous amount of miles in just 10 minutes, but now, you know, it's time to exit. I exited expecting to be in the middle of Shanghai, and what I exited into was about 15 miles from the middle of Shanghai still. And now you had to basically get a taxi that would take you about 2 hours, or a local train that would take you about 45 minutes, or walk, which was probably the fastest. But basically you went incredibly quickly, and then you met this sudden, amazing, unexpected bottleneck. And to me, I think that's a fantastic metaphor for what's happening with AI. You can go faster than anything you've ever gone before, but you're going to hit this sudden, unexpected bottleneck. You know what that is? That's humans. Because the reason we've developed AI is because human, particularly like conscious intelligence, like working memory, right? You know, human, working memory, we think of it at NLI as our capacity. Human capacity to solve problems, make decisions, change behaviors is actually incredibly limited. That's why we've developed AI, right? Because humans can't process, every single legal document in the world in a second like AI can. We can hardly process one. So we're going to actually have to understand humans much, much better if we're going to get the best out of AI, which is ironic, right? We're actually going to have to understand human bottlenecks for capacity and for change to really get the most out of AI. And it's interesting, the pandemic's hit, and for us at NLI, we were like, wow, everyone needs to understand humans better. And then hybrid hit, and like, everyone needs to understand humans even better. Now AI's hitting, and we need to understand humans even better. So there's this increased drive and need to really understand what makes people tick and how we function and how to motivate better, how to manage better and work within capacity. So that's kind of the catch cry for this session. I think one of the themes anyway is thinking about these bottlenecks. And with that, I'm going to hand to Scott to take us away. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, how you doing? Good morning. This is a really exciting time for a cognitive scientist to be alive. In this age of AI. Back in 2001, when I was at Carnegie Mellon studying human-computer interaction, we dreamed of what the future would look like. And I'm excited to say, and also a little bit terrified to say, that it's here. And I want to talk a little bit about what this means for the future of humanity, the future of human potential. That's my vibe. My beat is human potential. And I think AI offers a lot of promise for human potential, but it also offers a lot of things that we need to think about. So let me ground a lot of this discussion today with just a basic understanding of what are human needs. Raise your hand if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All of you, right? Raise your hand if you think he actually drew a pyramid. Turns out he never drew a pyramid. So I've been doing this research the past couple of years, kind of reimagining actually how human needs work. It doesn't work like a video game where you reach some level of need like belonging and then there's like a voice from above, congrats, you've unlocked self-actualization, and then you don't have to worry about, you never have to belong ever again, no, it's not how life works. So I've been working on this revised model of human needs. I think a sailboat is a better way of thinking about what it means to be fundamentally human. I promise you I'm going to get to the AI, but I want to just start on what it means to be human first of all. And this will never go away. Human evolution, it's going to take a long time for any of this to change. So even with all this rapid stuff that's going to be put on top of and augment all of this, these basic human needs will still stay. So we have the boat, which represents security needs like safety, our need for connection, our need for self-esteem. It's very hard to move if you feel unsafe, if you feel lonely, if you feel like you're not have anything that gives you a sense of pride or a sense of respect in this world. But eventually, if you want to move, you have to open the sail if you want to grow and move in the spirit of exploration, love, and purpose. So none of this is going away. So the question is, how can AI augment our human needs and help us do things better? So I've identified some key areas I'd like to talk about today that offer promises of AI, and then I'm going to talk about some of my concerns. In terms of promise, first one really important to keep in mind is all the possibilities for enhancing cognitive efficiency. So AI will certainly be able to ease the load on our mental processes, as David mentioned, working memory. Load will be reduced in lots of important ways. It'll streamline tasks, so that'll be exciting for a lot of people. If you raise your hand if you often do a lot of boring, automated, repetitive tasks. Raise your hand if you ever have to do that. Well, AI will really help with that, okay? And that's will be exciting in a lot of ways. It'll also liberate our mental thinking for innovative thinking. This is something I've been thinking about a lot, is the kind of brain networks associated with imagination and creativity. This is what we did at the Imagination Institute. We differentiated the brain networks associated with the brain network, the default mode brain network, associated with imagination and forward thinking, from the executive attention network, which is where you're really focusing on the task at hand or manipulating things in working memory. It's be a very interesting question, the extent to which AI will rewire our brains. And I think it will. I really do think eventually we'll get much more stronger connections within the what I call the imagination brain network, or the scientists more boringly call the default mode brain network, but I call it the imagination network. It sounds a little sexier. I think we really will, because our working memory and our executive attention will not be as many demands. I think that AI will be really quite good at helping us with that. And will also enable us to do experimentations through product launches. So before you actually launch a product, I think AI will be wonderful for allowing us to simulate, what is the audience? Because with creativity, a sense of the audience is super important. So I think it'll be very valuable to be able to kind of simulate and see, okay, well, how's this going to land with these audiences before you actually launch the product? I think that's huge potential there. I think it also will reduce reliance on abstract thinking so much, or put so much demand on requiring IQ as a hiring requirement. They still, in a lot of job interviews, they administer IQ tests in some job interviews, and I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think it'll be as necessary in the future. Also, although one could make the argument it actually will be more necessary for us to outsmart the machines once they take over, but that's a little bit, sorry, that's a little bit farther down the line. Another thing is personalized. Good, I'm glad that joke landed. I practiced that in the mirror. I practiced that one in the mirror this morning. Okay. Another thing is definitely there's a lot of opportunities for personalized growth. I think I look a lot about the research on brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, and its potential to help alleviate a lot of human limitations or human slowness. Computers, I think, will eventually be able to process neural inputs and make decisions much faster than even our consciousness processed it. And I think this is actually going to touch on a lot of issues of free will. Something another topic I'm very interested in it'll be very interesting to think, how much would that freak you out if the decision before you even hit your consciousness was made, on a computer. But I think BCIs will actually, brain-computer interfaces will actually will help us think faster and automate things, because our consciousness is a bottleneck. Human consciousness is a bottleneck. So that'll be super interesting. Another thing, and I didn't know if it really fell within the realm of AI, and forgive me if someone wouldn't put this in the category of AI, but it's an interesting technology. Transcranial direct current stimulation, TDSC, is a very exciting technology, I think. It also does have a lot of ethical implications, and there are a lot of things to think through. But it's been shown that there are certain devices that can activate certain areas of your brain and shut off other areas of your brain. We can actually have the conscious decision which ones. It's not random. It's not random which ones. We say, oh, we want to turn up the juice a little bit on your prefrontal cortex, or we want to turn down the juice on it because we want you to. And there's some preliminary data shows that it really can stimulate creative thinking. It can lower depression. I know some people that are working on that in collaboration with other technologies and things. Also, I think we can custom tailor pathways for skill enhancement. We can do a better job aligning the skills and interests with suitable projects. And I also think AI has potential within this domain of growth for tailoring, for For therapeutic things, I think everyone should have a therapist, first of all. I'm a big, big fan of mental health, and I host, it's literally called The Psychology Podcast. So it's like, I'm into psychology. And I think that AI shows a lot of potential for mental health in the workplace when you don't have resources or funds for a therapist on hand. I hope it's never becomes a full replacement for a therapist, but if you're feeling really sad someday, you really want to talk to someone or something, AI I think can get to a point someday where it almost start to feel indistinguishable from a real live human, and can maybe even offer you tips and strategies. That's what happens when I get nervous. I say weird things. Tips and strategies for helping you emotionally regulate. I mean, look, these things are important in the workplace, when you're getting, right now I'm emotionally regulating, right? So imagine if you had this AI system that actually took the best of psychology to help you really strategically have resiliency and help manage your emotions in the workplace. And I think there'll also be a lot of opportunities for creative insights. AI-powered creative content can be a great source of inspiration. Maybe you're feeling a lack of inspiration someday in your workplace, and you say, "Hey AI, let's give me something to, relating to this topic, this task I'm supposed to be doing. Inspire me, in some way." And it might give you some really, truly inspiring content that is relevant and that actually helps stimulate new ideas. I think that AI also has this amazing capacity above and beyond humans to integrate various domains of knowledge and help us come up with great insights based on that knowledge. But what are some potential downsides? Well, there are definitely things that we need to be thinking about right now. I say right now because I remember, the last 10 years, I feel like there was a lot of talk in our field of cognitive science of like, what should we be thinking of in the future, But today, okay, this shit is real. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but it's real, okay, it's happening, okay? Chat, GPT, these things are here, and they're not going away. So I see a bunch of things I want to talk about that are in a couple minutes here, potential downsides. Look, lack of autonomy and self-value. When AI starts taking certain people's jobs away or reassigning jobs, there's a lot of potential there, but there's also a lot of things for basic human identity and basic human self-value, and a sense of autonomy is extremely important. I would also say that in the social and interpersonal domain, the need for intimate, high-quality connections, researchers call them HCQs, high-quality connections, it's so important. I've been doing research on HCQs in the workplace, HCQs in education, when you have a manager. That kind of deeply personal connection is something I don't think AI is ever going to fully replace that need. And what I'm concerned about is that it might get to the point where we think it can replace it, and we no longer recognize the value of HCQs. HCQs, high quality connections, I link to the idea of unconditional positive regard. Carl Rogers talked about unconditional positive regard. Okay, it'll be great, when a computer gives us unconditional positive regard, but it can feel a little empty. Because you're like, okay, that's great. You're programmed to not give a shit about me, But or to pretend to care about me is another way of putting it. But I think to always have a human there that you feel like they really do care about you and they really do have unconditional positive regard for you and what maybe your struggles that you're going through, I think will always be extremely important. And then there are serious concerns of ethics and bias. I hope we talk about this on the panel with machine learning, but there are other techniques, and I've heard from Jeremy actually that there's some techniques that don't fall so prey to bias, and I would love to hear more about that. We were talking about that on the Zoom call. But I think there is a lot of potential when you're sorting through lots and lots of data to find small patterns in data that can actually be harmful if enacted, and so I think we'll always need humans to have something called common sense, Let's always keep that common sense and not completely always outsource that 100% to the computers to make those decisions or the AI systems to then implement, the practical policies based on it. Sure, they can help us with the data, but let's be very clear, we use a little common sense and human compassion, dare I say, human compassion. I'll end on the word compassion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Quick conversation between the panel. Maybe we can get folks back up on screen, Bob and Barbary. Barbary, you want to go first maybe? Any reflections on Scott's session? Any thoughts there? Barbary? Oh, we can't hear you somehow.
Human-centered approach.
There we go. Now
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
no.
great. I really think that that is the right way. We have to manage this powerful enabling technology in the right way. I'm definitely an optimist and have seen across the board many ways, positive ways that generative AI is making for a better way to work and creating better jobs and more opportunities and positive economic impact. But I think it has to be done responsibly, and I really appreciate the talk today.
Thanks, Barbary. Bob, any comments there?
Scott's book, Transcend, is really amazing. I guess I wasn't right on. Scott's book, Transcend, is really amazing. And I love the idea of the sailing ship on a rocky sea. It's what we call in our work the VUCA world, in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse over the next decade. We're thinking future back from 10 years ahead, working backwards. The link that Scott drew to personalized growth is, I think, the powerful link we ought to explore on this panel. And the challenge is we don't have a language to describe the resource that we're sort of approximating with the term AI. You know, AI has been around a long time. The term was coined in 1956 at the famous Dartmouth conference, and it was a bad word to begin with. It was just a bad story. This story of computers replacing people, it was just too simplistic. And the term we're using is more augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. But even that isn't very good. And you'll see in the work that Jeremy and I will show that we're trying to probe now for a language that helps us talk about this emerging ability to help personalize growth, to help us grow, to help us augment. But often it's going to be about augmentation or enhancement. It's occasionally going to be about automation.
Thanks, Bob. Theodore, any comments, thoughts on Bob?
Yeah, I really appreciated the thoughtful comments that Scott made, not only reviewing the advantages, the hype, the opportunity here, but also some of the disadvantages and this need today to be a little bit more balanced of how we look at AI. It's not going to solve all our problems. I think we need to remember that we have to solve a lot of problems. AI is just a tool. It's not the goal of everything we do.
Yeah, fantastic. And by the way, folks putting in comments and questions on the chat, we'll get to those towards the end, but feel free to put any comments or insights or questions in the chat as well. Jeremy, any reflections on Scott's?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And I would actually say that all systems are biased, all AI
including humans.
Including humans. And the better that you understand your own biases through the principles of psychology and neuroscience, the better you can do that explicitly and on purpose instead of accidentally and maybe in a damaging way.
Yeah, consciously biased. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, every single event is seen through the lens of how old you are, what country you're from, you know, what kind of day you had, all the biases you've had. Like, there is no kind of, objective reality. Everything has a filter and a frame, right? So the book 1,000 Brains by Jeff Hawkins is phenomenal in describing the physicality of the cortex and how everything is in a map with huge different layers of context in there. There is no kind of objective reality that way. So super important to realize that there's going to be huge bias and framing in all these processes. But I'm inspired by the opportunity for kind of individual development, personal development, personalized support. And as long as we're giving people a lot of autonomy in that, I think there's incredible things we can do. We're already experimenting with that in our solutions. Speaking of solutions, let's go to the next, actually before you do, let's give you a couple of minutes to digest. Give you a couple of minutes, talk to a person next to you. If you're new to the summit, that just means make some connections, talk to the person next to you. If you're online, use the chat. Share your comments in the chat with other folks. And then Barbary will come to you in about 3 minutes. Make a friend, chat to each other, go for it. right, let's get started. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. So, we were looking at this question of how is AI relevant to you, and everyone in this room pretty much is involved in change in organizations. You're trying to make organizations better, and a big piece of that is the technology that you use. And so we thought we'd go to one of our favorite technology people, Workday, that we integrate a lot with. We work with a lot of common partners and integrate into the system. And we said, let's have the folks from Workday tell us what is actually new. And I interviewed Barbary, who you'll hear from in a moment, and my mind was blown about what's actually in use now and what's coming. And I thought, wow, you have to come and talk to our summit. She said, I can't be there in person, but we said, no problem, we're going to use technology, and here we are. So Barbary, welcome to the stage. Let's get you up on screen, and love to hear your thoughts. We've got the first slide up.
Great. I really thought that the statistics that you presented, 56% of organizations are using AI, was really revealing. Because I think up until now, when I talk to most customers of Workday and companies across the board, the impact of AI on jobs has been really abstract for most organizations. I don't know if you feel like that in the audience, something that seemed to be something that they had to think about out in the distant future, but not anymore. We've seen the acceleration of innovation. We've seen applications coming to market with innovative new ways of using generative AI. And I think organizations are now seeing how quickly and how broadly our work will change, right? Generative AI is able to write code, design products, create marketing content and strategies, analyze legal documents, provide customer and employee service with a high personalized delivery system, and accelerate even scientific discovery. And we've all seen these headlines. There's a headline every day about the impact of generative AI on the job market, how it's going to be disruptive, right? Even just this month, there was a new article from the World Economic Forum on the jobs of tomorrow. And what these articles are saying, they started to be alarming in the beginning, say in the April timeframe, but now what everyone is realizing is that if harnessed in the right way, generative AI can create better jobs, better ways to work, and deliver amazing economic impact as long as it's done responsibly. We have heard from the World Economic Forum that ChatGPT is expected to help augment employees, not necessarily replace jobs. It's really that augmentation that Bob talked about is a really important way to look at it. That's going to enhance over 26 million jobs. There was also a study recently released called ChatGPT for ChatGPT, which is really looking at the labor economic impact in the US market and workforce alone, that said 80% of all jobs in the US today can be impacted, augmented by 10% of their task. And more importantly, that 19% of those workers can have more than 50% of their tasks automated and impact. So what is happening right now is organizations are trying to understand, how can I harness in a good way, in a responsible way, the power of generative AI, and what's going to be the impact on my organization? So if we turn to the next slide, there's an interesting company that we've been working with called WorkHelix. And WorkHelix has an application that is designed to help assess and analyze what is the specific impact that generative AI can have on your own organization. So what it does is it goes through, and hopefully you can see the example right here on the slide, is it will go through all of your jobs and your job families and detailed work tasks, and it will estimate for you what is going to be the impact on the jobs in your organization. They call that the total workforce exposure. So what percentage, and this example that you're seeing, it's a high number. It's a tech company here in this example where 57.1% of the total workforce is opportunities to be impacted by generative AI. And over to the right, more importantly, what organizations are looking at is, what does that mean from a cost savings? And so what you see here is productivity opportunity, that 57.1% of jobs translates into 35.6 million in wage bill. So cost savings that I'm able to to get through generative AI. And then what it does is it helps organizations break down inside their organization which jobs represent the highest opportunity. So where can they get started if they want to look at where they need to reskill or where they need to replan for their talent or where they need to rehire. This really helps them identify where in their organization, which jobs, which tasks can be augmented and help. In addition to just giving them the heat map and giving them the ability to see the greatest impact, it also provides for every job and every work task within a job what is available generative AI capabilities in the market today to help really augment and supercharge your workers. And it will provide all the risk associated with that generative AI technology, the implementation timeframe, and the overall benefits. So it's been very powerful, and we ourselves are using this technology at Workday Inside in a POC to help us start to plan and think about how do we need to shift, how do we need to reskill, how do we need to think about where we're hiring for generative AI. Now, in addition to just talking about how generative AI is impacting work and impacting jobs, it's also impacting HR technology. And I'm seeing a dramatic shift in the capabilities and innovation across the board in generative AI. So perfect. What you can see here is I have seen in the last 6 months, over 100 different companies coming to market with generative AI, both incumbents and startups. And I have seen over 50 very innovative use cases available just for the office of the CHRO alone. Some commonalities that we're seeing is you're seeing a whole new set of offerings in the market. They call them co-pilots or assistants. And what is important about this technology is it provides, as Sam said, hyper-personalization. You can really deliver engaging candidate and employee experiences that have never been able to be delivered before because of the level of data and information and processing power that can go into these experiences and the learning that can be done. You're also seeing this present a whole new user interface. So employees and workers across the board no longer want to log in and transverse across enterprise applications. They want to have a personalized conversational interface that they can talk to and that responds to them with their request. And then what we're also seeing is that it's really helping them get more creative time thinking. So helping them with those administrative tasks and helping them automate that and simplify and streamline. So I'll go quickly just through some examples here today. Obviously, one of the biggest areas that we're seeing adoption of generative AI applications is in talent acquisition, both on the candidate experience, because now they can deliver at scale a very hyper candidates, all the way from helping them identify what jobs match their skills and preferences to helping them apply for jobs, schedule interviews, compare offers, and even onboards. So very powerful. And then on the recruiter side, it's really helping them generate job descriptions that are more accurate for the skills and talent that they need, and to create very personalized candidate engagement campaigns that are really helping them reduce talent acquisition costs and have higher outcomes. And of course, that goes all the way through employee experience. So we're seeing that across the board, where now with generative AI, you can provide very personalized onboarding experiences, deliver high quality service delivery to all employee requests, and even deliver personalized career development and growth plans that also is showing up in performance management, in which you're seeing coaching co-pilots that can really scale and develop your leaders across the enterprise at much more affordable and effective ways. And we're also seeing that from an employee standpoint, we're seeing some really innovative companies really tackling the healthcare benefits, helping employees figure out for their needs and their preference, what are the best benefit plans for them, how to get telehealth in a personalized way, and figure out what's the difference between the plans and what best plans to select. And of course, we're also seeing co-pilots that are helping business leaders, HR leaders, really analyze the data and tell the stories of their data. So becoming their personal business advisors. So I don't think there is one area that isn't being touched with generative AI. And these are just a few of the many examples that we're seeing and looking at from an investment standpoint at Workday Ventures. And with that, I'll turn it back for some discussion.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. So yeah, Barbara's looking at like what Workday should invest in. So she's really scanning the horizon and looking at everything that's out there and just so thoughtful about kind of what's coming. It's got me thinking about AI coaches in a different way as well. We're weaving that into our lead solution as a platform that you'll go back to over a whole year or more and kind of continue to get that support. Thanks so much, Barbara. Bob, any comments on the future of HR tech from Barbara? Any reflections there, Bob?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Barbara, what you're doing and what you've highlighted. The thing to point out about today is the present. The present is so noisy. It's really noisy. So we need to take more of a future back point of view to try to sort out what are the values, what are the perspectives, what are the purposes that we're building on. And if you look at the frame from the effort that WorkHelix is doing, it's really interesting. You know, they call it total workforce exposure, your annualized AI exposure, and then your opportunity. This is from the point of view of the company. I think it's also important, and this data helps with that, it's also important to say, what does this mean for the worker? And what does it mean for, and that was a big issue with the writers' strike, for example. What does it mean for the worker? And then what does it mean for the leader? The work Jeremy and I are doing is mostly with top executives, with CEOs, with C-suite, with board members, you know, asking how do you want to be augmented, thinking future back from 10 years ahead. The question isn't whether. We're all going to be augmented in some way. You know, if you're not going to be augmented 10 years from now, you're going to be out of the game. So we're all going to be augmented somewhere. The question is how. You know, how, and here's the time where we can actually choose. And this data, I think Barbara's done such a good job of showing the noisy now, and what human resource leaders need to be doing is saying, what's your point of view? You know, don't get overwhelmed by the noisy now. What's your point of view about all this? What are your priorities?
That's fantastic. I think we'll go to the next chapter. There's so many rich insights in this, but we'll go to the next chapter and then give you a chance to digest after this one. So thanks so much, Barbara, for your thoughtful comments. You know, you've probably had this experience of you go to an event and someone you know reasonably well says, oh my gosh, you should really talk to this person. You're like, yeah, whatever, you know, you get that all the time, you know. And so I was at this event on the West Coast, Silicon Valley, and actually one of the senior people from Stanford, we were doing a lot of work with Stanford over there, said, oh, you've got to meet this guy, Theodore. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And he says, no, you don't understand. Theodore has invented a black box like they have on airplanes for the operating room. I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, no, they collect 1 million points of data every day, and they're studying the operating room and saving lives, many lives every year in every room. And he's been doing this for like 20 years, and it's actually really, really working. And I'm like, that must be fascinating. And I immediately texted Theodore and called an email and said, we got to meet. We finally got some time recently together. And I said, you have to be at our summit, because what he's doing, but also what he's learning and in the process is fascinating. It's fascinating to us, and I think you'll find it fascinating for you. So Theodore, over to you, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. And I clearly remember when we met a few weeks ago, and that was a really impactful meeting. And thank you for inviting me here to not only share some of our experience, but also feed off the energy and engagement and creativity in this room. So I hope this is not just an isolated event, but also a foundation for future collaboration, because I see there's so many things we can do together. And we talked a little bit about technology, data, obviously AI, and there's so many applications in consumer and marketing and sales and so many other areas of our life, HR. But I live in a different world. I live in a world, and those of you in the room or online who are in healthcare I'm sure will relate to that. We live in a world where a patient comes to the operating room with a cancer in the left lung, and the surgeon removes the right lung. Or a young woman comes to give birth, goes home with a retained foreign object. The surgical team forgot an instrument in her. And you know, many of you will say, wow, does this really happen in modern healthcare? And it actually does. It is much more prevalent than many of you will imagine. And I remember many years ago when I had lots of discussions with my father-in-law, who's a pilot, and he used to say if people knew how dangerous it is, they probably wouldn't. They'll be a little bit more concerned. And if people knew how dangerous healthcare is, they probably will be very concerned. So it's probably close to a couple of decades since the Institute of Medicine came with the report. It's a foundational report called "To Err is Human." In that report, they estimated about 200,000 people in the U.S. die each year as a result of medical error. There was a couple of reports a couple of years ago suggesting that number is much higher. And in fact, some of the reports estimated that healthcare is the third leading cause of death in the United States, after heart disease and cancer. It's more than accidents. It's more than lung disease. It's more than Alzheimer. It is a true challenge in modern healthcare. So 400,000 people die as a result of medical error, and some argue that that's even an underestimation. There are some others who argue that probably the methodologies can be questioned, but there is no question that there are so many things that we can and we should do better today in healthcare. So we felt many years ago that one of the major challenges in healthcare, in particular in surgery, was the fact that we turned the operating room, the surgical operating room, into one of the most secretive environments in modern society. So what happens there stays there. Whenever we leave the operating room, we forget, we deny, we ignore. We find a way to deal with failure, and the next day the same thing happens again. So we wanted to change that, and we wanted to see what are the barriers. Why did oil, nuclear, aviation, military made this transition, maybe not military, but some of the other high-risk industries made the transition from safe to ultra-safe, from reactive to proactive, and we still failed to do it in healthcare. And the answer was we needed access to data. We needed more transparency. We needed more accountability. We needed real solutions that make us better and make our industry safer. So that's what the hypothesis with the OR black box is. We wanted to bring more insight, bring more transparency, collect high-quality, objective, actionable data, and implement that in practice. So recently we did the first large study where we showed dramatic improvements. So if we know what we're doing wrong, we can actually impact it. If we know what we do right, we can celebrate it and reinforce these behaviors. And some of this initial research that done by our group and our collaborators suggested that if we do that, if we bring high quality data and we use the data to improve, we can save lives. We can dramatically reduce mortality after surgery. We also found that if we actually know what the process measures are that lead to retain foreign objects, to wrong-size surgeries, we can introduce processes that mitigate these risks. And we found that if by doing that, we eliminated it in one of the largest hospitals in the country. We also showed that an average operating room in the United States loses about $1 million a year because of inefficient scheduling of procedures. So when a surgeon says, oh, this is a straightforward procedure, it will take me 1 hour, it usually takes 2-3 hours. So the average or the mean scheduling error during a surgical procedure is about 1 hour, 1.5 hours per procedure. So that leads to enormous waste of money in fiscally challenging times. But more importantly, I remember a couple of years ago when we looked at why the majority of the operating room nurses were exiting healthcare. They were leaving and finding different jobs. We found the number one reason for them leaving was unpredictable overtime. So they didn't know when they can go home. They expected to finish at 3:00 p.m. and the surgery continued to 5, 6, 7, and it's very hard to maintain a good lifestyle. So it was a massive tool to lead to employee retention. So we also, one of the major challenges that we found in the process of learning from existing data sources is something that's well known in human factors engineering, a phenomena that's well studied, the phenomena of work as done versus work as imagined. And I can tell you in more than 20 years of practice as a surgeon, I have never dictated an OR note that's anything short of perfection. And I can guarantee that not every surgical procedure was perfect. So what people say, what people do, and what they say they do are often very different things. And that's what we want to change. That's what we want to impact with that technology that we created, and that's expanding rapidly throughout the world. So what we do with the World Black Box, we sensorize the operating room, we digitize the operating room, so we capture massive amount of data, so we can really reconstruct what happened in the operating room, not what people said happened. So we generate these data streams. We integrate also with the existing data streams, from electronic health record to engineering systems in the hospital to the vitals of the patient. We also capture data from using emerging technologies, so we can actually add a wearable technology that can estimate whether the surgeon is under stress, whether the surgeon is fatigued, or the nurse or the anesthesiologist are fatigued, whether they've lost attention, whether we can also even monitor through wireless EEG the brain activity. One of the interesting findings we established a couple of years ago is that actually the surgeon's brain registers that something bad's going to happen approximately a minute before it happens. So by adding this technology in real time, we have real opportunity to make a dramatic impact. And really, the real opportunity here is how do we create this holistic view of this environment? How do we capture every piece of the puzzle, study every piece of the puzzle, and see the big picture of what needs to be improved? How these different factors, the skill of the surgeon, the communication, situational awareness, psychological safety, fatigue, distractions, and so on. So how do all these factors interact to result and determine whether the result of the surgery will be exceptionally good or exceptionally poor, and we can predict that. So the opportunity here is, and what we can do today is we capture, as David said, 1 million data points per operating room per day. And data today is easy. The data is cheap, there is a lot of noise in it. The question is, how do we turn this data into information that can help us improve? And there, artificial intelligence on various aspects, especially of explainable artificial intelligence, has helped us a lot. I remember 5 years ago when we started this, we were processing about 100 surgical procedures. We could analyze about 100 surgical procedures a month. Today, we analyze 50,000 surgical procedures a month. Early next year, we will double that, and we project that towards the end of next year, we'll be able to analyze close to 500,000. So what kind of data and what kind of opportunity that will give us to improve, I can only imagine, and I really believe that this transition from data to information to action, what it really matters, and why all of us are here today, is going to make a dramatic change in the way we care for our patients.
Let's have a conversation about that. Firstly, wow. Glad to see you. You see why I was like, oh, we need to talk, right? The implications of this, obviously, far-reaching in so many different ways. So I just want to have a couple of questions here to sort of make a few points, and I'm sure the panelists have some thoughts, and then we'll give you a chance to talk as well amongst yourselves. But firstly, like now, the data is relatively easy to collect and store, right? Even 5 years ago, really hard to collect, store, navigate. Now, basically, huge amounts of data. That's the relatively easy problem, right? The hard problem is actually finding insights in the data. That's a lot harder. But the hardest problem, from what we were talking about when we dug in, was actually getting people to change their behavior, right? And so tell us a little bit about sort of just a minute or two on sort of the kinds of insights that you dig for, and then also the hardest problem of what you've hit up against in that. So tell us about the insights a bit. What do you find?
I mean, we found a lot of interesting insights. We found, for example, that distractions are a major source for error and injury. We found that fatigue is a major source for error and injury. So the question is, and we found a lot of similar findings. We found that if the temperature in the room went above a certain grade, a certain threshold, people underperformed. We found that if there was a disruptive behavior, traditionally the surgeon is the only decision maker in the room, and usually it's either my way or the highway. And that impacts psychological safety. So poorly functioning teams caused much more errors and much more adverse events. They were poorly performing. So that impacted that disruptive behavior, stress, poor communication, poor situational awareness translated into poor outcomes. So we saw all these things very early on. We saw these patterns very, very early on. But how we implement them in practice, how we generate action was very, very difficult because of the most difficult thing to change. It's not technology, it's not data, it's not information, it's culture.
Yeah, interesting. Even really, really positive changes, something like 25% of people make it their mission to push back against it. It's really fascinating. So how have you been creating the human changes? And we'll go to Bob and Barbara in a second. I know they're dying to ask questions. How have you been kind of making the human changes happen? What sort of process have you been doing there?
It's an interesting question. So I clearly remember first time I presented this idea in a room full of surgeons like this, and I remember somebody stood up and said, I've been practicing for 30 years, there's nothing I can learn. And I said, wow, if I were a patient, I probably will run away if my surgeon says something like this. But I remember early on when we started communicating this information, say about efficiency. The natural reaction of leaders was to, hey, let's bring everybody in the room and tell them that this is not acceptable. You got to perform much better from tomorrow, and those who underperform will be either fired or punished. And there was a different type of reaction we saw in some other institutions. They said, wow, this is such a great opportunity. Let's use our competitive spirit. Let's use this as a team building exercise. Let's put it in every screen throughout the hospital and say, hey, we are number 5 among 100 hospitals. How can we work together as a team to be better next week? How can we look at when we come to work on Monday morning and see that we underperformed last week? How can we work together to overperform this week? So there were these two different reactions, and we found that those with open mindset, with the growth mindset, did so much better, improved so much better, and did so much better for their patients. And I certainly know where to go for care if I need surgery one day. I will choose the team, the well-functioning collaborative team with a growth mindset any day, compared with the team with this pseudo-obsession around high performance.
I look forward to the data on the difference between having a psych safety and growth mindset versus not. So actually pulling that apart. I know you're in about 20 sites already. 27 sites, 27 different operating theaters. So incredible. Bob, you want to weigh in there? I sense you got your brain bursting to share some questions or thoughts or reflections. You want to weigh in there, Bob?
Yeah, You're definitely right. Since 9/11, I've been studying top leadership and trying to figure out what are the skills and literacies and mindset that it will take to thrive in this increasingly VUCA world. I have not met Theodore before, so I just heard the presentation that you heard. But I think, Theodore, you model what I think is one of the most delicate skills around innovation, one of the most delicate mindsets and kind of literacies around innovation. In a VUCA world, innovation begins with humility. It begins with humility. And so often, particularly in Silicon Valley, we see innovation that's driven by arrogance. You know, I know what this is. I can do it. And sometimes that works. But in general, as we think future back in this kind of world, what's going to win in terms of innovation is the combination of strength and humility. And you modeled that for us. So thank you.
Barbara, any quick reflections, and we'll give you guys a chance.
Yeah, I think my question is what everyone in the audience wants to know. Can we have the list of those operating centers that
Probably on your website, isn't it? It will be by tomorrow.
Okay, good. That's my most pressing question.
Perfect, thanks. Jeremy, any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, I love your point about the difference between what people say they do and how they do things and how they think that they do things. And this is, of course, really critical in your work, and thank you for your work. But it's also important in HR work and all of our work as well. These affect people's lives in a really strong way. And with generative AI, we're often trying to automate or augment things that we do in our heads and build them now into an external system. And so trying to take that out and build it, when we make mistakes, then that impacts people. And so understanding really clearly how you work today in a new way actually leads to those better outcomes for people. And we don't always have a million data points the way that you do, but we can try and do our best across different domains.
Yeah, fantastic. Scott, any thoughts?
Yeah, holy cow. I forgot my mic was on when I was like, wow. and then I heard me say that. I guess, like, first of all, you put psychology studies to shame. Like, we get so excited if we have 100 participants and we found psychological safety, and you're like, he's like, oh yeah, we have 1 million, data points, no big deal. But so that's amazing. It's really amazing. But I guess just real quick, the nerd in me, just from a methodological point of view, I'm so curious. How do you measure psychological? You're not having them do first-person reports, are you? No.
No. Example of team function and psychological safety. We measure some surrogate markers. For example, psychological safety is how people in the room with different from different professional groups report adverse events. So there is a touch panel in the operating room that the black box has, that anyone in the room should feel empowered to say, this was great, this was terrible, and do it at any point during the session.
You get enough data points.
So we get a lot of data points from there, and we can see that highly functioning teams report a lot of good and bad things, and poorly functioning teams are silent. I can tell you, when I'm in the operating room, the worst thing that can happen is silent operating room, especially in a critical situation. I don't mind where people argue. I don't mind when people come with different and wrong opinions. It really bothers me when nobody speaks.
Yeah.
So important.
That's fantastic. I feel like everyone could talk all day and hear about this. There's such tremendous implications to this. My mind was blown when I started to talk to Theodore, and I hopefully yours is as well. But can we give a big thank you to Theodore and his work? I sense the energy buzzing in the room. Let's give you a quick 2 minutes to digest with the person next to you, because I know the implications of this are huge. Just turn to the person next to you, the person next to you. 2 minutes. We'll come back together for the closing big piece. Go for it. All right, let's bring you back together. I know that seems like a hard act to follow, but we've got some incredible presenters next with some incredibly important ideas, looking at AI from a different perspective. You see how we kind of wanted to put something together that looked at all these different angles on AI, and Theodore is like a huge provocation of what's possible, and also how to think about that constraint, that bottleneck at the end. Is we've got to put a lot more attention into that. So I'd like to welcome up Jeremy and Bob. They're going to interact together. We're going to do something we've never done before, which is have virtual and real-time participants. And then they're going to do something even crazier as well. So over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, David, and great to be here with you this morning. Bob, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm on.
Great. My name's Jeremy. I run Handshake, which is a generative AI consultancy and research lab. And since 2019, we've been helping companies, governments, nonprofits build, plan, and train around generative AI. We work across the world in places like Nigeria and China, as well as here in the US and in Silicon Valley. My favorite and most interesting work is as a partner and research affiliate at Institute for the Future, particularly with Bob in our work on augmented leadership and how AI will affect leadership. Bob, do you want to introduce Institute for the Future a little bit?
Sure. So just quickly, we're the longest running futures think tank in the world. We're based in Palo Alto. It's an independent nonprofit, but we're focused on edgy things, and we're thinking all the time future back. We are not experts in the present. We are focused 10 years ahead. We've gotten really good at that, but we're there not to predict, but to provoke. And this is a conversation where we're hoping to take what we're working on in a practical way and provoke your insights.
Thanks, Bob. And I think conversation is an important word there. I said that we've been looking at this since 2019, which in generative AI is kind of like a really long time ago. Like, can you imagine 2019? And there really are no experts on this yet. This really is a conversation, and we're learning together here. But we're going to share some of our thoughts on how far we've gotten so far. We're trying to think about how to talk about AI, generative AI particularly. And we have some ideas on how to do this. And I think in a lot of cases, the words really don't exist yet. You'll hear people say things like, oh, AI, it doesn't actually understand anything. Or like, oh, AI, it's not actually learning anything. And I'm perfectly willing to accept that. But what it's doing really looks like understanding and kind of looks like learning. And so what do we call it? And if you're going to go up to a plane and say, well, it's not flying because the wings aren't flapping, that's fine, but it sure is up in the air. So what do I call that? We've been experimenting with that, and the word chatbot I think is a particularly bad one. When I hear chatbot, I feel like I'm maybe like on MySpace or something, or like annoyed that I can't talk to a human. And some words that we've come up with are possibilities explorer. Generative AI is a reflective tool, something that you can go back and forth with to expand and extend what you're doing. Bob, any other thoughts on you touched on this earlier, but any other thoughts on words that help explain what generative AI is and what we can do with it?
Yeah, definitely. I think we got a ways to go, but we're making progress. I like generative AI a lot better than I like artificial intelligence. I like augmented intelligence or augmented leadership a lot better than I like artificial intelligence. The term co-pilot, which Barbara used earlier, I like things about that, and Microsoft has been using it quite generally, except that when I go talk to pilots, the pilots say, well, the big function of the co-pilot is if the pilot has a heart attack, the co-pilot is good enough to land the plane. That's not true yet. That's The AI can't land the plane. So we're using the term foresight coach now. I think that's a good interim. Again, Barbie used terms like assistant, like mentor. Those are reasonable, but we just don't have the language. And the beginning is to admit that we don't have the language. Instead of getting stuck in really old-fashioned limited terms like artificial intelligence, which is the worst term to describe an emerging technology that I've ever studied.
Thanks, Bob. And so that's the beginning of the conversation. And the other key limitation that we wanted to highlight is that without understanding your own work, you can't augment it. This is the biggest bottleneck that I face when I'm building these systems with companies, is that they want to automate their work, but they don't actually know how their work happens. And there's certain kind of, like product managers are generally pretty good at thinking about these kind of things. But with generative AI, we're often taking multiple steps that are happening inside of our head and reflecting on them and trying to make them transparent. And this affects every part of the technical stack. There are no answers in AI. You have to bring the answer to it, even though it does automate some of it. And so this is where neuroscience and psychology come in, is the more you understand about your own biases, the more you understand about what you're actually doing inside of your own head, the better your chances of actually efficiently extending that. But you want to do that safely and responsibly. And we've tried to think of some ways to kind of guide people in thinking about this. And for us, a key point is clarity versus certainty. Now, this is something that applies to a lot of your leadership, Bob, outside of generative AI. Could you briefly introduce for us this difference between clarity and certainty?
Sure. So in the VUCA world, what wins in terms of leadership, what wins in terms of strategy is to be very clear where you're going, your direction, but very flexible how you get there. So you can have clarity. The military calls this commander's intent or mission command or flexive command. You can have clarity, and leaders must have clarity. You can't. You can't have certainty, even though our brains want it.
We do want it. And it's really tempting to want the generative AI systems to give you the right answer, or to maybe wait until someone creates one that will have all the right answers in it. I'll wait a year and then they'll figure out the one that's already always correct. That's not going to happen. There's always going to be an element of dynamic between you, and it's always going to be limited by your own capacity to understand what's coming through, and your ability to analyze it and interrogate it. But particularly today, these systems are subject to things like hallucinations, and we're from California, so we know that's not always a bad thing. But in the wrong place, it can really lead you astray, and you shouldn't rely on it solely for answers. And from a technical perspective, we'll talk about this. You really want the answers to be outside of the AI, and you want to be telling the AI what the answer is and how to work with it. And you want to make sure that it's anchored in trusted truths and tools. This last one sounds simpler than it is. What information you trust and what your truth is a hard thing to determine. It's a hard thing to determine individually, and it's even harder to determine collectively. And a group of people that have an advantage here are actually people of faith. These are people who are very accustomed to saying, this is what I believe, this is how I believe it, and this is how it affects my actions, and writing that out explicitly and talking with other people about it. This is not a small group. This is 85% of the world and growing. And I work with a group, AI and Faith, on thinking through these things. But even if you are not a person of faith, you need to get good at this muscle of thinking about what you believe and connecting to your purpose, and not only doing that internally, but talking about it to others and explaining it so that you can explain it to the AI.
So Jeremy, just
in the future, we'll all be augmented. Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, just to build on that, faith in this world is good. That's why it's called a leap of faith. Extreme belief is not good. That's certainty. So, I agree with you in the sense that faith is kind of a muscle that helps in this sense to develop your clarity of direction. So you know where the truth is from your point of view, you're grounded essentially. But extreme belief can be very dangerous in this world.
Absolutely. In the future, we'll all be augmented, but how remains the question. Bob, you've done a lot of thinking about how you want to be augmented today and in the future. What's some of your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have. And, I write books. So this is my 13th book, Office Shock, that just came out. And we're going to share a bit of that in a minute. But to me, the hardest thing about writing books is the first draft. It's the blank page. So I've developed a template, which we're happy to share with you, which is I want help ... And for me, I want help writing first drafts. This is what I mean by developing a point of view. How do you want to be augmented as a leader? And we'll show you the Foresight Coach in a minute that we've developed to help with the one-on-one foresight coaching I'm doing for new CEOs. And I'm doing this one-on-one based on the skills and the literacies and the mindset I talked about earlier. And we're putting all that in what would generically be called a chatbot, but as Jeremy said, we don't like that term. We're calling it a foresight coach. And then as I have those conversations, those get built in too. So for me, the way I want to be augmented, I want help writing first drafts. That's my priority. The second thing I want help on is reaching new audiences. The third thing I want is finding signals and evaluating the signals that are in the outside world. And the fourth area I want help on is challenging my assumptions. So I'm just suggesting that each of us as leaders ask ourselves this question: how do I want to be augmented, thinking future back from 2033, and then fill in the blank. I want help, ...
Thanks, Bob. And this is not just a AI question. It's also, this is you today, right? Not just your AI avatar.
That's right. That's right. We're going to show you the coach in a minute, and we're experimenting with voice clones of me and avatars of me. But honestly, they're kind of stuck in the uncanny valley still. So we're now having our foresight coach talk back in text, and it sounds kind of like me. And the grounded truth is my books. We're not releasing it to the outside world because we don't want to expose it to that hallucination potential yet. So we're starting with the grounded truth of my books and of also the conversations I'm having with CEOs and the leaders that I'm working with one-on-one.
Great. So as this is what we've used to develop Foresight Coach, and this is from our book, Office Shock, and this is what you can use to think about your leadership augmentation and how you want to be augmented as a leader. We won't spend much time on this, but you can check out more of this in the Office Shock book and elsewhere. But you want to think about your purpose, your outcomes, your climate impacts, and this does matter in the technology world, belonging, augmentation, place and time, and agility, in this order. But the most important one is your purpose and your outcomes. If you can focus on that, you're pretty far ahead.
It's interesting that the three outcomes, climate, and belonging are blank on my screen. That may be a good thing in the sense that what we've done, and this is from our new book, Office Shock, what we've done is create a framework where as you're thinking about generative AI, as you're thinking about the future of work, as you're thinking about the future of offices, it should always begin with, why an office at all? Why do you want generative AI at all? What's your purpose? What's your values? What's your grounding? That's what we're talking about earlier. Then think about outcomes, climate impacts, belonging. Who do you want to work with? Then ask yourself explicitly, augmented, how do you want to be augmented? Then you get to where do you want to work and when and how do you tie it all together? So this is a framework you can use as you think about how you want to be augmented.
Great. Okay, great. Then let's go straight to that. Can we bring that up on the screen? Great.
Okay, so this is live, so we'll hold our breath.
Yeah, this is a live demo. And it's a pretty simple interface. A lot of AI things have a lot of fireworks and flash and pop, but we're augmenting Bob here, and Bob is a very humble person, and so we kept it simple. We are starting out with a question of what will the role of neuroscience in the future of leadership be? And It takes about 30 seconds to write it out. This is meant to be read. It's an extension of the book. And so I'll tell you what's going on as we're looking at this. Basically, it's a standard retrieval augmented setup. We have Bob's books here, and we tell it that this is the truth. Bob's books are the truth, and you can trust them. So anytime you're answering a question, first check out these books and find the most relevant part. And so it goes out and it tries to find the most relevant part of the books and then pulls that into its answer. And this grounds it in something that we trust. It prevents that hallucination. Right now, it's just a question answer, but we're building this out into more of a conversation. It also goes out and then it finds the most relevant image in Bob's books so that it pulls in a diagram to help you think about what you're reading. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It looks pretty practical, except for this funny part about some scarf model or something. But what I want you to think about here is, what is the truth that you trust? And what is the process that you'll take to analyze that truth in order to create these AI systems that extend you and that extend your leadership?
Fantastic. Let's get some, firstly, give these guys a hand. Incredible. So what I'm hearing is that we've created a digital version of Bob, and that when the technology catches up, it'll look and sound like Bob as well.
We're getting close, yeah.
Getting close. So you better ask Bob a question, and it will answer as if it's Bob with everything. We've been thinking if we can do that with all our research as well, and plug in everything we've ever published and all the media and webinars, and put it in there. And so that's something we may integrate into our digital work in the next few months.
Can I just add to that, David? David, can I just correct one thing? It's not meant to be a substitution for me or embodiment of me. We're trying to avoid the narcissistic side of this. It's rather, I think of it as a conversation with my books. So we're trying to take all the ideas. This is the 50th year I've been a professional futurist at Institute for the Future. So we've got 50 years of history, and then we've got all these new conversations. So we're imagining it as being an embodiment of that kind of essence of the content that I've created with my colleagues at the Institute, and then create a conversation with that. So it's not really a Bob bot. It's more that content.
We're going to try and avoid that idea. But you imagine, suddenly you think about, for Workday, maybe there's all the information every Workday
exactly.
customer experience person has ever dealt with, right? And for Theodore, you imagine, you could talk all the surgical insights, everything in there, you could go. So there's incredible opportunities with this. And the scary thing is this is here now. We can do this now relatively quickly and cheaply. So this kind of idea is going to take over very quickly. And I think there are lots and lots of implications for your organization. Jeremy, Bob, thanks so much. We'll have a quick conversation, and then we'll go to Q&A. Thanks so much.
Great. Just sit down.
Some comments.
Is my mic on?
Scott and then Barbara, yeah.
I think in the future, some people need to be de-augmented. Do we what's to prevent tell me, how can I destroy the world? How can we put in some fail-safe so we don't just give evil people as much information as possible to do bad? But I also have another question. What's preventing people from exploiting and using this and making money off of creating a bot? I know you hate the term bot. A possibility explorer. Yeah. Because I have some colleagues that are concerned. My friend Rita found that someone created this kind of thing for her. They created it and they're making money off of her, brain that they're using to simulate. So what's to preventing someone else from exploiting this and using it to make money off of?
Yeah, there's going to be tremendous new legal challenges, ethical challenges. I mean, it's a whole world of that kind of barreling down on us really quickly. Something to think about. Barbara, any reflections and thoughts on Bob and Jeremy's presentation?
Yeah, I really like what I saw, and I think you were spot on. I mean, if I think about it from a Workday's customer perspective, we have very comprehensive software that can do a lot of things, but it's very difficult for customers to understand the art of the possible. Greg Pryor was great about helping customers understand how to use this in best practices. So if we could leverage the advisor to really help based on outcomes, I like the framework that Bob presented, and then provide an advisor on how to get the best use and optimization out of your software to reach those outcomes, I think that would just be amazing for our customers. I always look at the positives of what generative AI can do. I really appreciate, Sam, that you bring us back to make sure that there's appropriate guardrails and we go in thinking responsibly. But I really like the concept of the advisor. I think I'll create a great prior advisor for Workday, and I think that would do really, really well.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, but Greg's in the room. He's just sitting over there, and
Oh, wow.
replicating Greg as an advisor would be amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much. Theodore, any comments on the presentation there?
I mean, I think it was fascinating, and like we talked a little earlier, David, I'll be very interested in understanding. We've gone a long way to understand biases by humans, and I'll be very interested in discussing whether these biases will be replicated by these systems, or will they introduce a brand new bias of their own, and how can we study that and predict and mitigate some of these challenges?
Yeah, really interesting. Are seeds the categories of bias for AI, or is there a whole different set of biases? I mean, one of my hypotheses is that it's reading, AI is reading all of our, information, and it notices that people make things up, right? Like, because people make things up a lot. Most of the newspapers are just made up stories. So it's reading people make things up, and it's reading, okay, let's make things up.
Yes.
So these kinds of things will reoccur in the technology. We do need to wrap up. We've run a little bit over, but I wanted to wrap up with some closing comments. AI is an incredible opportunity, but it's an incredible opportunity because of how limited general human intelligence is, particularly for conscious, rational processing. And that intelligence, a bit like the traffic in Shanghai, is going to be the bottleneck. It's going to be the constraint in many ways. And so I loved Jeremy and Bob's thoughts on how to augment yourself really effectively, really understanding your process. Obviously, Theodore's session really blew our minds on what's possible and the kind of changes that we can make in the world. And great to hear from everyone here, absolutely on Scott, particularly on the science and the deeper foundations and our needs, and Barbary from Workday. But just a fantastic session. I've got a couple of announcements, but can we just give these guys an incredible round of applause? And I want a big acknowledgement to the technology team behind the scenes who just did something that's never been done before in any way. And this is our first hybrid summit that we've ever run, and we're loving it. We've had over 1,000 people on the platform, having conversations. It's wonderful being in person, wonderful being online, but it's just been a phenomenal experience so far. We're adapting with a couple of things. The second half of lunch, lots and lots of people were interested in what we're doing with our foundational leadership program called LEAD. So we're going to do a demo in here. We'll do an announcement down there to remind you, but the second half of lunch, we'll do a demo of LEAD and kind of go a little bit deeper for those interested. There's some really fascinating AI that's going into it, including something a bit like Bob's done. We're actually going to have a coach that you'll be able to ask questions like that in there. So we'll talk through that second half of lunch. Otherwise, we've got 20 minutes. Go and meet some people, digest this session, talk about how your mind's blown, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you very much.
Hello again, everybody, and thanks so much. That marks the end of our rebroadcast of the summit session, Making AI Work at Work. Before you go, I just wanted to let you know that as you close out of today's session, you will receive a feedback, or you will be directed to a link that takes you to a survey to submit your feedback, as well as any questions or needs that you'd like us to follow up on. I saw some of you asking this earlier today. Will the recording of the session be made available to you? Yes, it will be. We will be sending it to you via email, along with additional resources for your learning. I did mention that we have a special announcement today, that is, and you probably heard a little bit about it from David already, but we have launched our new solution for leadership development. This is available both to organizations as well as individuals. It is called LEAD, the Neuroscience of Effective Management. You can learn more about this amazing new program at the link that I've posted, that Tony has posted in the chat. Thank you so much, Tony. You're amazing. In addition to that, I just want to send you a warm welcome and invitation to our upcoming Leadership Development Mini Summit. We'll be getting into case studies and the neuroscience of leadership. The neuroscience of leadership on December 13th from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can learn more about that in the link in the chat. With all of that said, we thank you so much for your time today, your engagement. If you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, please go ahead and get in touch with us via email. And this is where we say goodbye. Thank you all for everything. I so treasure the time we spend together as a neuro leadership community and look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care, everybody.